You think you know the people closest to you? Think again. One night shattered everything I believed about my family, and left me questioning everything. This is a story of betrayal, secrets, and a choice that changed my life forever. I never thought my life would take such a complicated turn. My name is Tyler, and I'm a college student at Riverside University in Portland, Oregon. It's been a grueling process filled with long nights and stressful days as I worked on my thesis. But little did I know, the real challenge wouldn't be academic, it would come from home. It all started on a Friday night. I had been pushing myself hard all week, staying up late to make progress on my thesis. By the time I got home that night, I was completely drained. The house was quiet when I entered, with only the soft glow of the kitchen light spilling into the hallway. "Tyler, is that you?" Lisa, my stepmom, called out from the kitchen. "Yeah, it's me," I replied, my voice rough from exhaustion. I trudged into the kitchen and saw Lisa at the stove, stirring something that smelled like roasted chicken. My dad, Stephen, was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. "You look wiped out, son," he said, glancing up at me over his reading glasses. Stephen was in his late 40s, a hard-working man with graying hair and a serious demeanor. I nodded, running a hand through my messy hair. "I am. This thesis is really giving me a hard time." Lisa turned from the stove, concern etched on her face. She was in her early 40s, and though she tried to appear cheerful, there was always a certain tension about her. "Have you been eating? You look pale." "I'm fine," I assured her, though my stomach growled loudly, betraying me. Lisa chuckled softly. "Sit down. Dinner's almost ready." I shook my head. "Thanks, but I think I'm just going to head to bed. I'm totally exhausted." "Are you sure?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "You really should eat something." "I'm sure," I said, already backing out of the kitchen. "I just need to sleep. Good night, guys." I heard them both call out, "Good night," as I climbed the stairs to my room. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I was out like a light. I'm not sure how long I slept before I became vaguely aware of someone's presence in my room. In my half-asleep state, I assumed it was just a dream, but then I felt a gentle touch on my hand, and my mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. My shirt was lifted slightly, and something cold touched my skin. The sensation was so unexpected that my body reacted instinctively, my muscles tensing. But I was so exhausted, so desperate for sleep, that I couldn't bring myself to open my eyes or move. What happened next is still something I'm trying to process. I felt a hand gently caressing me in a way that no family member should. My body reacted, even though my mind was in shock, confused by the unexpected intimacy. I wanted to speak up, to ask what was going on, but my exhaustion held me down in a sort of paralysis. Part of me wondered if this was just a vivid, strange dream, but it felt too real, too unsettling to be just my imagination. The touch continued, becoming more intimate. Panic and, to my shame, a sense of pleasure warred within me. My body was betraying me, responding to the gentle caresses even as my mind screamed that this was all wrong. Just when I thought I couldn't handle any more, on the verge of forcing myself awake to confront what was happening, it stopped. I heard soft footsteps retreating, and then silence. I lay there, my heart pounding, my mind racing. What had just happened? Who had been in my room? I wanted to get up, to investigate, but my body was still heavy with exhaustion. Before I could make sense of anything, I slipped back into a deep sleep. When I woke the next morning, the events of the night before felt like a distant, hazy memory. Had it really happened, or was my overworked mind playing tricks on me? Still groggy and confused, I stumbled downstairs. The familiar smell of coffee and bacon guided me to the kitchen. Lisa was already there, busy at the stove as usual. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said cheerfully. "You must have really needed that rest. How are you feeling?" I stared at her, searching for any sign that something had changed, but she seemed completely normal, humming quietly as she flipped pancakes. "I'm okay," I said slowly, still unsure. "Where's Dad?" "Oh, he had an early meeting," Lisa replied, sliding a plate of food in front of me. "Eat up. You need your strength for all that studying." As I ate, a feeling of unease crept over me. Lisa continued talking about her plans for the day, but my mind was stuck on the strange events from the night before. Had it really happened? And if it had, was it Lisa who had come into my room? I couldn't bring myself to ask her. What if I was wrong? The thought of accusing my stepmom of something so inappropriate made my stomach churn. I finished breakfast in silence, thanked her, and headed back to my room to work on my thesis. But as I sat at my desk, staring at the laptop screen, I couldn't focus. The memory of those touches, whether real or imagined, kept flooding back into my thoughts. I spent the next few days in a fog, struggling to balance my thesis work with the confusion swirling inside me. Every time I saw Lisa, I couldn't help but feel a mix of embarrassment, curiosity, and guilt. She, on the other hand, acted completely normal, as if nothing had changed. The tension built up inside me, but I stayed silent, unsure of what to do or say. It wasn't until the following Friday that everything came to a head. I had gotten out of class early and rushed home, eager to work on the final touches of my thesis defense, which was scheduled for the next day. I was so focused on my work that I didn't even notice when Lisa quietly entered my room. "Tyler," her voice startled me, making me jump in my chair. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said softly. "I just brought you some snacks, you've been working so hard." I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. She stood there, holding a plate of cookies, smiling warmly, but there was something different in her eyes. Or maybe it was just me. "Thanks," I said, taking the plate from her. But instead of leaving, Lisa perched on the edge of my bed. "How's the thesis coming along?" It's going okay," I said, struggling to keep my composure. "I'm just stressed about the defense tomorrow." Lisa's expression softened with concern. "Oh, honey, you're going to do amazing. You've worked so hard for this." Before I could process what was happening, she moved closer, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. The touch sent a shock through me, instantly reminding me of that night. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to know. "Lisa," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "that night last week, was it you in my room?" The moment the words left my mouth, her expression changed. The warm smile faltered, and for a brief second, guilt flashed across her face. "Tyler," she began, her voice low, I don't know what to say." And in that instant, I knew it wasn't just a dream. It had really happened. Lisa, my stepmom, had come into my room that night, and what she had done crossed every boundary. We sat there in silence for what felt like forever. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. Anger, confusion, and something I couldn't even describe battled inside me. Finally, I broke the silence. "We need to talk about this," I said, my voice firm. Lisa nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "We do, but not now. Your father will be home soon, and you need to focus on your defense. Can we talk tomorrow, after everything is over?" I wanted to demand answers right then and there, but she was right. My future was on the line, and I couldn't afford to lose focus. "Not now." "Okay," I agreed, though my heart was pounding with frustration. "Tomorrow." Lisa stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I'm so sorry, Tyler. I never meant for this to happen. I promise we'll talk tomorrow. I'll explain everything." She left the room quietly, and I sat there, my thoughts spinning in every direction. How was I supposed to focus on my thesis now? How was I supposed to act normal at dinner with my dad, knowing what I knew? But I had to try. I had worked too hard to let this throw me off course now. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to push thoughts of Lisa and that night to the back of my mind and dove back into my work. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test the limits of family, love, and trust. As I sat there, focusing on academic theories and methodologies, I had no idea how much my life was about to change. The next morning arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. On one hand, I was eager to finally present the thesis I had poured my heart and soul into for months. On the other, I couldn't shake the anxiety about the conversation that awaited me afterward. I barely tasted the breakfast Lisa had prepared, my stomach knotted with nerves. She moved around the kitchen, her usual cheerfulness forced, tension evident in the way she glanced at me when she thought I wasn't looking. "Good luck today, son," my dad, Stephen, said, clapping me on the shoulder before heading out for work. "You're going to crush it." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside me. If only he knew what was going on beneath the surface of our seemingly normal morning routine. The thesis defense passed in a blur. I presented my research, answered questions from the panel, and defended my conclusions. Somehow, I managed to keep my personal issues from clouding my performance. When it was over, my advisor smiled broadly and congratulated me. "Excellent work, Tyler. You should be proud." I should have felt elated, but all I felt was a growing sense of dread. As I made my way back home, all I could think about was the conversation with Lisa. When I walked through the door, she was waiting for me at the kitchen table with 2 steaming mugs of coffee in front of her. "How did it go?" she asked softly. "Fine," I said tightly. "I passed." "That's wonderful," she said with a nervous smile. "I knew you would." I couldn't take it anymore. "Can we not do this?" I cut her off. "We need to talk about what happened." Lisa's smile faded, and her shoulders slumped. "You're right. Please, sit down." I took the seat across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm mug of coffee she had prepared for me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was unbearable. "Why?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. "Why did you come into my room that night?" Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before meeting my gaze. I don't have a good answer, Tyler. I've been asking myself the same question since it happened." "Try," I insisted. "I deserve to know." She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "You're right. The truth is, I've been struggling for a while now. Your father, he's a good man, but he's been distant lately. Always working, always distracted. I've been feeling lonely." I listened, a swirl of emotions stirring inside me, empathy, confusion, and discomfort. "That night," Lisa continued, her voice barely a whisper, "I had a little too much wine. I don't know what I was thinking. I saw your light on and thought maybe we could talk. But when I came to your room, you were already asleep." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I don't know what came over me, Tyler. You looked so peaceful, and I don't know. I just acted without thinking." I sat there, trying to process her words. Part of me wanted to be angry, to lash out at her for violating my trust, for stepping over the line in such an unthinkable way. But another part of me saw the pain in her eyes, the genuine remorse in her voice. "I'm so sorry, Tyler," Lisa said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What I did was inexcusable. I betrayed your trust and your father's. If you want me to leave, I understand." The thought of her leaving, of our family breaking apart, hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything, I realized I didn't want that. "I don't want you to leave," I said slowly, trying to make sense of my feelings. "But I don't know how to move forward from this. How can I trust you again?" Lisa looked at me, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. "I don't know either, Tyler. But I want to try. If you're willing, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Eventually, I nodded. We'll figure it out. Lisa wiped her eyes and gave a small, shaky smile. Thank you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful you're willing to try. It wasn't easy. Over the next few hours, we talked through everything, her feelings of loneliness, her struggles in her marriage with my dad, and my confusion and shock over what had happened. As the conversation went on, I began to see her not just as my stepmom, but as a flawed person who had made a huge mistake. But still, the wound was fresh, and it would take time to heal. What do we tell Dad? I asked as we reached a pause in our conversation. Lisa's face fell. I don't know. Part of me thinks he deserves to know the truth, but another part is terrified of what it would do to him. To our family. I get it, I said, understanding her fear. It's a tough call. Maybe we don't have to tell him everything, but we can't just pretend this didn't happen. You're right, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe we talk to him about the distance between us, how I've been feeling neglected. We can address the problems in our marriage without revealing everything. Yeah, I said slowly, that might be the way to go. At least it's a start. Lisa nodded, wiping the last of her tears. Thank you, Tyler. For listening. For being patient with me. I didn't respond. My emotions were still too mixed to offer any comfort. We agreed to take things one day at a time. She would work on communicating better with my dad, and I would focus on finishing my college work. As she stood up to start preparing dinner, Lisa paused, looking back at me. Tyler. I'm so sorry. I'll never forgive myself for what I've done, but I hope, in time, you can. I don't hate you, I said, and I meant it. But it's going to take some time. She nodded and gave me a watery smile before turning back to the stove. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about everything we'd discussed. I felt a strange sense of relief that the air had finally been cleared, but there was still so much to process. The next few days were difficult. I avoided being alone with Lisa as much as possible, and when we did have to interact, we kept our conversations short and to the point. I could see that she was making an effort to reconnect with my dad, and he seemed to be responding well, oblivious to the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Over the next few weeks, things started to settle into an uneasy routine. Lisa made a real effort to rebuild her relationship with my dad, and for a while, it seemed to be working. I'd come home from class to find them cooking together in the kitchen or planning a weekend getaway. My dad, always busy with work, was now making time for her, and it seemed like they were reconnecting. It should have made me feel relieved, but I couldn't shake the tension that lingered beneath the surface. Every time I saw Lisa, I was reminded of what had happened. One afternoon, about a month after our initial conversation, I came home early from class and found the house unusually quiet. Lisa was curled up on the couch in the living room, reading a book. She looked up, startled when I walked in. "Oh, Tyler," she said, closing the book. "I didn't expect you home so soon." "Class ended early," I replied, feeling a little awkward as I hovered near the doorway. "Where's Dad?" "Working late again," she sighed, her frustration evident. "Seems like nothing's changed after all." I hesitated for a moment before sitting down on the couch next to her. "Are things not going well?" Lisa gave me a sad smile. "I'm trying, I really am. But sometimes it feels like we're too far gone. I don't know if it'll ever be the way it used to be." I felt a pang of sympathy for her, despite everything that had happened. I could tell she was genuinely trying, but it didn't make the situation any less complicated. Without thinking, I reached out and patted her hand in a gesture of comfort. The moment our skin touched, I felt a jolt of something, an electric charge that shot through me, taking me by surprise. Our eyes met, and suddenly the air between us felt charged with an intensity one hadn't anticipated. Lisa must have felt it too, because she quickly pulled her hand away and stood up abruptly. I should start dinner," she said, her voice shaky as she hurried into the kitchen. I sat there, my heart racing. What had just happened? Why did I react that way to something as simple as a touch? I had thought we'd moved past this, that we were putting that night behind us, but clearly, there were still unresolved feelings simmering beneath the surface. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the moment over and over in my head. I knew what I was feeling was wrong. Lisa was my stepmom, my dad's wife. But I couldn't deny the strange pull I felt toward her, the way my body responded to her presence. I thought about my dad, completely unaware of what was happening under his own roof. I thought about Lisa, trapped in a marriage that was struggling, and I thought about myself, caught in the middle of it all, battling emotions and desires I didn't fully understand. As dawn broke the next morning, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. By the time morning came, I had made up my mind. I couldn't keep living under the same roof with this tension between us. The feelings I was experiencing, confusion, guilt, and attraction, were too much to handle, and the only solution I could see was putting some distance between myself and the situation. With a heavy heart, I started packing a small bag. I didn't know where I'd go exactly, maybe crash at a friend's place for a while, but I needed time to clear my head, away from Lisa and the complicated emotions tied to her. As I zipped up my bag, I heard movement in the hallway. Lisa was up, probably heading for the kitchen to start her morning routine. I took a deep breath, knowing I couldn't just leave without saying something. I had to tell her I was leaving, and explain why. When I opened the door, I nearly ran into Lisa. She was still in her robe, her hair tousled from sleep, and she looked at me with wide eyes as she noticed the bag over my shoulder. "Tyler," she said, her voice tight with concern. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation I knew had to happen. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I think it's best if I stay with a friend for a while." Her face fell, a mixture of understanding and dismay washing over her features. "Oh, Tyler," she sighed. "Is this because of yesterday? Because of us?" I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "It's not just yesterday. It's everything. I can't keep pretending things are normal when they're not. I need space. I need to figure things out." She reached out as if to touch my arm but quickly pulled back, letting her hand drop limply by her side. "I understand," she said softly. "But please, can we talk about this first? Your dad would be devastated if you just disappear." The mention of my dad hit me hard. In my rush to get out, I hadn't even considered how my sudden departure might affect him. "Okay," I agreed reluctantly. "We can talk." We made our way to the kitchen, the tension between us palpable. Lisa busied herself making coffee, her movements jittery, as if she were trying to hold herself together. I sat at the table, feeling the weight of my decision pressing down on me. As Lisa set a steaming mug in front of me, we heard the front door open. My dad's voice called out, "I'm home." Both Lisa and I exchanged panicked glances. He wasn't supposed to be back yet. A moment later, my dad walked into the kitchen, smiling as he saw us. "Well, this is a nice surprise, both of you up early on a Saturday." His smile faded as he took in the scene, my packed bag, Lisa's strained face, and the heavy silence that hung between us. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. In that moment, looking at my dad's confused face, I knew we couldn't keep lying. The weight of the secret between Lisa and me was tearing everything apart. If we had any hope of moving forward, we had to tell the truth. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "We need to talk. All of us." The next hour was one of the hardest of my life. We sat around the kitchen table, our mugs of coffee growing cold as Lisa and I told my dad everything. We took turns explaining what had happened, starting with the night Lisa came into my room, the confusion that followed, and the tension that had been building ever since. My dad listened in stunned silence, his face a mask of disbelief and hurt. When we finished, he stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen with his hands clenched at his sides. "How could you?" he finally asked, his voice raw with emotion. He looked at Lisa, pain etched in every line of his face. "How could you do this to us?" Lisa broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Stephen. I never meant for any of this to happen. I've been feeling so lonely, neglected, but that's no excuse. What I did was unforgivable." My dad turned to me, and the look in his eyes nearly broke me. "And you, Tyler? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I was confused and scared. "I didn't want to hurt you." He let out a bitter laugh. "Well, that worked out perfectly, didn't it?" The silence that followed was deafening. The three of us sat there, reeling from the aftermath of the truth. We were three people who loved each other, but we had all hurt each other in ways that couldn't be undone. Finally, my dad spoke again, his voice calmer but still full of strain. "I need time to process this. I'm going to stay at a hotel for a few days." "Stephen, please," Lisa began, but he held up his hand to stop her. "I'm not making any decisions right now," he said quietly. "I just need some space to think." As he walked out of the kitchen to pack a bag, Lisa and I sat in stunned silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Lisa and I sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity after my dad left the room. The kitchen was eerily quiet, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on both of us. Lisa's hands were shaking as she wiped away the last of her tears. "I'm so sorry, Tyler," she whispered. "This is all my fault." I shook my head slowly. "We're all responsible for our choices. I should have spoken up sooner. And Dad, well, he could have been more present. We all played a part in this." She nodded, but the guilt on her face was unmistakable. "I just never wanted it to get this far. I never wanted to hurt either of you." The next few days passed in a blur. My dad stayed at a hotel, and Lisa and I avoided being alone together as much as possible. Every moment in that house felt heavy, like we were tiptoeing around a fragile truth that had the power to break everything. The conversations between Lisa and me were brief and practical, no longer laced with the confusion and tension that had once consumed us. My dad returned after a few days. He was quieter than usual, but it was clear he was trying to keep things together for the sake of the family. He didn't mention the conversation we had, nor did he discuss any decisions about their marriage. The silence was both a blessing and a curse. After my dad returned, the three of us started the painful process of healing. It wasn't easy. We had difficult conversations, moments filled with anger, and days where it felt like nothing would ever be the same. But slowly, bit by bit, we began to rebuild. My dad and Lisa decided to start couples therapy, addressing years of unspoken resentment and miscommunication. Lisa confessed to her loneliness, and my dad finally acknowledged the emotional distance he had created with his constant focus on work. There was a lot of hurt between them, but there was also a lot of love. As for me, I sought out therapy on my own. I needed to untangle the complicated feelings I had about what had happened with Lisa, and the way my emotions had been caught between attraction, confusion, and guilt. Therapy helped me process it all in a way that made sense, and it allowed me to begin forgiving myself. Over time, things in our house began to feel normal again, though normal had a new definition. The tension between Lisa and me had faded, replaced by a cautious but honest relationship. We set clear boundaries, making sure that we never spent too much time alone together, and we committed to talking openly if any confusion or feelings ever surfaced again. It wasn't an overnight change, but with effort, we were finding our way back. Months passed, and as I threw myself into finishing school and preparing for my future, the incident with Lisa became a part of my past, rather than something that haunted me every day. My dad and Lisa worked hard on their relationship, and it showed. I'd come home from classes to see them spending time together, whether it was cooking dinner, watching a movie, or going out for the evening. My dad had become more present in his marriage, and Lisa seemed genuinely happier. One evening, nearly a year after the incident, the three of us sat down for a family dinner. I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. The laughter and warmth that now filled our home were a far cry from the tension and confusion that once consumed us. "I'm proud of us," I said suddenly, surprising even myself. "We didn't let this tear us apart." My dad smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my shoulder. "We've come a long way, son. It wasn't easy, but we made it through." Lisa nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. "I never thought we'd be sitting here like this," she admitted, "but I'm so grateful that we are. I love you both so much." As we continued our meal, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Our family wasn't perfect, no family is. We had made mistakes, hurt each other in ways that once felt impossible to forgive. But somehow, we had found the strength to forgive, to heal, and to move forward. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I found myself thinking back to the person I had been a year ago. Confused, scared, unsure of what the future would hold. I wished I could go back and tell him that things would be okay. That the pain and confusion wouldn't last forever, and that with time, honesty, and effort, even the most complicated situations can be resolved. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt, for the first time in a long while, completely at peace.